We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. The weekend is here. Memorial Day weekend is here. Congratulations, guys. You made it through the work week, and hopefully you're having a nice, restful, long weekend, but also taking a moment to truly express your appreciation for those who gave the last full measure of devotion to make that happen. We'll bring on Garrett to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I want to tee up what we got today, because today on the American Radicals Podcast, make sure you give us a follow here and subscribe. We're going to be doing the Saturday Grab Bag, the tradition like no other, but we kind of have a theme to today's Saturday Grab Bag. We were looking into futuristic stuff last weekend. Today is all going to be about the lies and the propaganda. So I have a nice X thread about everyday lies that we're confronted with all the time, some of which will surprise you, some of which you kind of knew for a long time, but it's nice to always have that confirmed. We're going to look at climate change, global warming, hole in the ozone layer, carbon capture, all the propaganda attached to that. Cage-free chickens, that's a lie. Artificial intelligence is supposed to be neutral, unbiased, but it's not really as it pertains to hiring. We have illegal salaries within the federal government that got exposed, and an anti-profanity policy in the U.S. military. So we got all that. We're got the churn and bird. Lots of videos today. It's going to be fun. And in order to get to the fun, we're going to get to Garrett O'Boyle, my co-host and cohort here on the American Radicals Podcast, who is going to be getting a head start on his Memorial Day weekend here. So you're going to stick with us as long as you can. And we want to make sure that we tee you up, because you're going to miss the end for your biblical worldview. Garrett, why don't you share that with us now, and then we can get to the meat and potatoes of AMRAD.
Sounds good, Steve. And, you mentioned this new policy coming out of the Department of Defense. And as all good infantrymen would say, I won't do it though, because this is a family-friendly show, Steve. And I'm about to do my biblical worldview. But in my younger days, we would all scream, F that. But yeah, we're gonna go a little bit. We're gonna take a little sidebar today, because it is Memorial Day weekend, like you said. And so usually around this time of year, I get a little more reflective. And as many of you know, I recently lost a dear friend of mine who I served in the Army with. And for us soldiers, we always think of each other as soldiers. And we think of our times together, especially on deployment, because those really stand out as formative experiences in all of our lives. And so this year, I'm just thinking about guys I've known over the years who I've lost. And sadly, this is relatively common too, is most people I know today and think I'm only 38. And I served with guys who were younger than that, or younger than me, and some who were a little older, but all of us were really young. And at this point, we have lost more guys outside of combat than we have in combat. And it's, I don't know, that's a weird thing to think about and grapple with. But it got me thinking of this passage in 2 Samuel. And for those who aren't aware, it's King David, and well, before he was king, but his dear friend Jonathan, who was the son of the current king Saul, they were slain in battle. And in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11, it says, "Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword." And then a little bit further down, there's a longer lament from David for them. And I'm just going to read a couple pieces of that. In the second half of verse 21, it says, For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. You, daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished. And for me, especially as I'm older these days, this lament and the poetic nature of it, and just the grief that David and his men felt for their comrades. It's something you can relate to, or at least I think many soldiers can, thousands of years later here, especially as we reflect on something like Memorial Day.
I mean, let's start off because I was thinking about this actually as I was preparing for the show, the lies and the propaganda. You know, you're an infantryman, a veteran of foreign wars, and the too many people I think in the country are still roped into the Rocky Four mindset where we're fighting against the Soviet Union. I thought of a scene from that. And at the time, I thought one thing, and now in retrospect, and particularly as we get into the details for today's show, I think I've done 180 degrees. But let me tee this up about lies and propaganda.
You have this belief that you are better than us. You have this belief that this country is so very good and we are so very bad. You have this belief that you are so fair and we are so very cruel.
It's all lies and false propaganda. All lies and false propaganda.
Huh. Huh. I mean, I'm not sympathetic to the commies, but at the same time, I think that we're going to get into some of the examples of lies and propaganda. And let's begin. I found this account on X who puts out these threads, and some of them are really interesting. Some of them I'm kind of like, I don't know. I found this thread, and the account is at Matrix Mysteries. Worth a follow for those who are looking here, at Matrix Mysteries. And he recently came out with one that is called, it's starts with a quote from Mark Twain: "The poison was never forced. It was offered gently until you forgot it was poison at all." It's a thread exposing the everyday lies and propaganda that we've been sold. So I looked at it, and it covers a full gambit of multiple different things. So we're going to work our way through several of them because some of them were, I think, things that I suspected or knew, or other things I was kind of like, I never thought of it that way. So the first one, I talked about sunshine, because it always goes back to
COVID.
And we were told to stay home and stay safe. And vitamin D from the sun was probably not a good thing to get. But the bullet point from the Matrix Mysteries is the sun never lied. Sunscreen did. They told you to fear the sun, to block it, avoid it, hide from the very thing your biology depends on. But sunlight fuels immunity, hormones, longevity. The real danger was never exposure. It was deprivation, which I have an accompanying video that is part of this thread, and we'll throw this up.
Well, in the U.S., 23 brands of sunscreen have been pulled from the market for cancer-causing properties. And if you think about sunscreen causing skin cancer, it just,
in the
23
US,
brands.
The law about filter in skincare hasn't changed for over 20 years. And there's like this.
What do you mean filter in skincare?
Yeah, the skincare, the filter, the sunscreen hasn't been changed. The law hasn't been changed for over 20 years. They're still using the same filter. That's why when you come to Europe, buy your sunscreen better in Europe because they're using way more modern filters. But, in general, filters in skincare is not the greatest ingredient. So if you damage your skin constantly, retinol, glycolic, acid peel, you damage. So your skin is vulnerable, it's raw. Sun even penetrates harder, you get more pigmentation, more aging, it can cause cancer.
Huh. And I love the European accent because it just reminds me of lies and propaganda by your false American media. Look, I think that there's definitely a link between sunshine, too much of it, and skin cancer, but I can't help but be disturbed by the fact that we have not updated the medical properties within our sunscreen for over 2 decades.
Yeah, especially for as litigious of a society as we are. And I use that term broadly to include the legislature. Every year, one of government's hallmarks for claiming they're doing a good job is, well, look, we created new laws. Okay, but you're not going to go back and update some of the old laws. And just, I can't help but think about sunscreen and the push for covering your body in this new artificially man-made creation to protect yourself from the sun. Yes, we all know the sun can cause damage if you're out in it too long, or if you're, I don't know, of Norwegian descent or something like that, and you're a little more prone to having potential sun issues. But if you do it smartly and you are out in the sun just a little bit at a time, your skin will adjust and adapt. And as you mentioned in the beginning of this, it's better for you. It's almost as if it was by design, Steve. How about that? But on top of it, I think of, it was decades ago where we made this push to cover your body in sunscreen whenever you go outside. And I think of these old pictures, I'm sure you've seen them, of people on the beach. Nobody's fat, nobody's obese, nobody's wearing sunscreen. People are eating sausage and bacon and eggs for breakfast, but they're not gaining weight. And all of this stuff started to metastasize around the same time. Eat the vegetable oil and the soybean oil, and not beef tallow or butter, because that's going to get you fat. And it's like, well, maybe it's pretty much like we've been lied to about everything.
How about the mirrors that people used to sunbathe with so they could double up on the sunshine? All right. So back to this this thread here from Matrix Mysteries, and we're talking about sunshine, and now let's go to big pharma, which you sort of alluded to there. So the pharmaceutical industry isn't built to cure disease; it's built to monetize it. Real healing ends the cycle of profit. So treatments are designed to manage symptoms, not solve them. And an adjoining visual for this thread is what's changed in the last 30 years. And for those listening, they have the disease or disorder on the left-hand side and the increase since 1990. So 35 years ago. And I'll just pull out a couple of them. We talked about ADHD, and then that's not really a physical symptom. It seems to be way overdiagnosed. It's increased 819% in the last 35 years. Bipolar, over 2,000%. I'm sorry, autism, over 2,000%, which there's been some correlations between the over-vaccination. Bipolar disease is almost 11,000%. Chronic fatigue syndrome sounds a lot like a new parent, but we have a definition for it now, 11,000%. Hypothyroidism, 700%. Osteoarthritis, 449%. I mean, you can just go down this thing. I mean, diabetes is very concerning, 300% increase there. So you would think as our medical advancements are happening, we would be curing these things and not just giving you an ongoing diagnosis.
That is such a crazy chart to look at. Fibromyalgia over 7,000%, which my understanding is that's kind of similar to this chronic fatigue syndrome. But if you look at all of those, man, each one I think is going to be a rabbit hole, because it's going to be tied into the monetization of big pharma. It's going to be tied into our food. It's going to be tied into all the fake ingredients that we put into things and that we shove down our children's throats. And that chart, if you went just taking that whole thing in like that, it's like, oh my.
Yeah. All right, so the skinny people on the beach who are using the mirrors so they can get double up on their sunshine, you said they're skinny. Like, what's going on there? What are they eating for breakfast? I knew this one. I don't know if you knew this one. You ever heard of Edward Bernays?
No.
The propagandist. So he invented propaganda, which was used by the Nazis later on. But his actual claim to fame, they changed the term propaganda because it had a negative connotation. They made it marketing. And he was assigned to make the pork industry a lot of money, which is how he came up with the term that breakfast was the most important meal of the day. So the idea that breakfast is an essential and wasn't discovered, it was manufactured. Edward Bernays, father of propaganda, hired to boost sales of bacon and sausage, not to improve the public health. So he went around to doctors and basically gave them a pamphlet that said, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And the doctors were like, well, he probably knows. And they did that. And as a result, we don't have skinny people at the beach anymore. We got lots of fat tubs of goo who look like of Wall-E, which is talked about here.
74% of American adults now are overweight or obese. Close to 50% of children are overweight or obese. 120 years ago, when someone was obese, there were case reports written about it.
Yes.
Literally, there were people in the circus if you had obesity.
Sideshow fat. Yeah, it was so unusual.
It was so unusual. It is now 74% of our country. 77% of young adults are unfit to serve in the military because of these issues like obesity. Now let's talk about diabetes. 50% a full 50% of American adults have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is a fundamental issue in how our cells, half the country, Tucker, have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and 30% of teens now have prediabetes. This was a condition that no pediatrician would have seen in their lifetime 50 years ago. 1% of Americans in 1950 had type 2 diabetes. We have 18% of teens with fatty liver disease, a disease that used to be in late stage alcoholics.
Man,
how do you overcome that?
You got to scrap it. You got to scrap everything you've been lied to about. You got to figure it out on your own. Just go back to what we used to do. You know, it makes me think too of my fast last year. I learned a lot about fasting during that time, even aside from the spiritual aspects of it. And it makes me think about what we started with in 2 Samuel. That came from my fasting journal one of the days. But the natural effects of fasting on top of it, even that alone, you had that chart of all these diseases that have increased 1,000-fold or 10,000 or 11,000-fold even. Fasting will help you cure a lot of that. And think of this myth, this propaganda that you talked about with the bacon and the sausage. Look, I love bacon and sausage as much as anybody. And that being said, you don't have to eat it all the time. And look at how that piece of propaganda continued to morph and grow over time. It started with this guy whose directive was to help sell more pork, and he did. But then people like General Mills and Kellogg's and big industry, breakfast industry said, "Hey, we're going to seize on that too, but we're going to twist it even more and say, no, you actually need to jack your system full of carbs first thing in the morning and sugar, and then go off to your day." When throughout human history, most humans throughout the majority of human history weren't eating. They were eating maybe 1 or 2 meals a day, and the portion sizes were nothing like we see currently. And oftentimes humans were scavenging for or foraging for or hunting for their food. And so they're expending energy. We don't expend hardly any energy anymore to get our food.
We wear devices on our wrists to tell us how many steps that we need to take. Right. That's where we're at with health. Within this thread, let's pivot off of health and let's talk about feminism. And again, this comes from Matrix Mysteries at Matrix Mysteries on X. This thread about exposing everyday lies and propaganda that we've been sold. This bullet point is: feminism was a scam to double the workforce. You were told it was about empowerment, but it wasn't about economics. Doubling the workforce meant more labor, lower wages, twice the tax revenue, while the cost of living quietly rose to match 2 incomes. 1 income became impossible by design. Families fractured. Kids were outsourced. Exhaustion became the norm, maybe chronic fatigue syndrome. It wasn't about equality. It was about control disguised as progress. And Garrett, I have an interesting example or an interesting champion of this message, someone who you might recognize as a proponent of about as much communism as you could possibly get in the United States. But back in the day, Pocahontas, she wrote this very interesting book about the 2-income trap. And this is Liz Warren from back in the day talking about how the 2-income trap is actually a real thing, and feminism, because a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, is a myth.
Indeed, there are books, not just from the 1970s, but from the 2000s, in which economists and other social commentators say the family that has both mom and dad in the workforce is economically diversified. If he loses his job, she still has her job. If she loses her job, he still has his job. And to me, that is the heart of the 2-income trap. When the budget shifted to take account of both of those incomes, so that going from needing 52 paychecks a year in order to make the mortgage payment and the health insurance payment, to needing 104 paychecks a year, his and her paychecks, in order to make the mortgage payment and the health insurance payment, the family didn't get financially safer. The family got riskier. So as prices are shooting up, prices for homes in suburbs, for example, what's happening is women, mothers, were increasingly going back to work to try to hit the target, to try to find a way to pay that mortgage. And what happened? The prices shot up. More of them went to work. The prices shot up again. More of them went to work. And they got caught in a trap that no one foresaw.
Man, J.D. Vance has gotten more baritone, and the beard works for him, right? Oh, I'm sorry. That was Elizabeth Warren.
What happened to her brain? I mean, I know this is a few decades ago, but for me, the common thread is the satanic lie. That's what the root of all of this is. She says they fell into the trap that nobody would have expected. Oh, you want to bet?
I disagree on that one.
Yeah, there are people who expected it, or at least the spiritual forces at work, as we covered in Ephesians 6 not too long ago. But also the feminist trap, it's rooted in the fall of man, in original sin. In Genesis 3, verse 16, it says, to the woman, he said, that the he there is God. To the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain and childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. And here's the kicker. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. That's not talking about sexual desire there. That's talking about the desire to be in control, to be in charge. And so going back decades, and she's right. When the shift happened from you need 52 paychecks a year to 104, the government, big business, pretty much everything that helps our nation run, they all did seize onto that and said, oh, well, people have more income now, more disposable income, or even just look at childcare. Both of you are going to go to work and let somebody else raise your child.
Well, that creates another job, right? So instead of having one dad goes to work, Ward Cleaver style, and June stays home, now June goes to work and they have to hire someone to take care of the kids. So we've turned one job into three. That's 3 taxpayers now. It's good for GDP. Come on.
And then the next logical step is the government schools. Have the kids stay there longer, have them go earlier. And look at how that's even changed. Now schools are serving breakfast and lunch, and maybe even a take home something or other for after, because they're there from before school starts until way after school ends, because mom and dad are at work, and just keep producing and creating. You've got another activity after school. And it's all, the real trap is to divide the family, and everybody is becoming a ward of the state. That's the goal.
And those government school lunches and breakfasts have lots of nutrients.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It is the most important meal of the day.
Thanks to Big Mike.
Right. I got one more from this Matrix Mysteries thread here, as we're talking about lies and propaganda that you have been fed every day. And it's going to be a nice launch off point for the thing I want to spend a bunch of time on. That's the climate change hoax. I mean, it was global warming and global cooling and global weirding, and climate change, though, is the in vogue term. Climate change isn't a crisis. It's a business model. The narrative has been weaponized to push carbon credits, green taxes, the endless solutions that enrich the few and burden the many, because right now we're fighting a war against carbon, right, Garrett? Carbon is the problem, even though you and I are made out of carbon. And I think that there's a nice accompanying video here where it's a discussion between a representative of government and the experts on global warming, global cooling, climate change about carbon. And because they're the experts, they know exactly how much carbon is in the atmosphere.
Panelists, what % of our atmosphere is CO2?
Repeat that question.
What % of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide?
About 5%.
5?
We'll go 7.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
That's what we're working on. What number do you think it is?
5.
5. Do you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7, 8. I'm going to hit the high end.
The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not 0.5%. It's 0.04%. It's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple of decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying.
Plant life dies off if it drops too low, by the way.
Oh, Steve. Oh, the lies, the propaganda, and the false godded nature of it. Well, we know she asserts it as
She
fact.
tried to pivot to transportation.
Right.
It causes the 49%. Oh, so it was responsible for the 0.0005% increase.
Your math doesn't add up, lady. But she's convinced that she's her own false god. It's humanism at its peak, where they deep down they want to destroy humans, and we're the cause of all problems. And it's up to her to figure it out and fix it and tell you how bad you are and how evil you are and what we know, because science, another false god of theirs.
They're the experts, right? Trust everything they know. They don't know the fundamental basics that congressperson is giving before them, and the chuckle hut nature of it. Like, why would I possibly consider this, right?
I'll see your 5% and I'll raise you to 7.
I thought it was an existential crisis. Why are you joking around here in this very austere environment here, where you're going to tell the American people that their SUV is a reason that the planet is going to die or something? And this is a long-standing scam. And let's pivot away from that.
How dare you?
We can pivot away from that because there is a historical basis for this. I want to go back to a time before you and I were born, but not long before, because we still had television and Dan Rather in color telling us about, I don't know, the reason that the SUVs are going to cause, well, we didn't have SUVs in the 80s, but the reason your cars are going to cause like Florida to go underwater.
Concern about rising temperatures on planet Earth heated up a hearing here in Washington today. For years, scientists have theorized about the dangers of the so-called greenhouse effect, the warming of the Earth's atmosphere due to the burning of coal and oil. And in recent months, as David Culhane reports, research has uncovered facts to support that theory.
Many scientists claim that the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere has been rising over the past 100 years, that the great sheets of pack ice in Antarctica are melting at a much more rapid rate than previously. And finally, that the sea level has been rising with increasing swiftness over the past 40 years. If these scientists are correct, about 25% of Florida would be flooded, along with low-lying areas all over the world. Climate changes could produce widespread disruption of agriculture. The American farm belt might be too dry, and the wheat and corn crops would have to move to Canada. Scientists blame the odorless, colorless carbon dioxide gas for these potentially dangerous changes around the planet.
Okay. And the animation of Florida, which is supposed to be 25% underwater, where they made 90% of it under the water, no manipulation or propaganda there from CBS News.
I just love it. It's 1982 that clip is from. And again, Dan Rather, right in the beginning, because I think, especially back then, well, not as much to a degree anymore. I think people are catching on to the lies of legacy media. But Dan Rather up there talking all prim and proper in his suit. He is the authority, and you better believe it. And he says, what did he say? He said something like, science and facts have shown this. Oh, really? Your facts. Well, how come you can still go visit the little placard at Plymouth Rock then? How come the sea level hasn't risen to cover these areas? I mean, what is this? 45, almost 43 years later? Oh, but 90% of Florida with our animation is going to be submerged. Okay.
Why did Barack Obama buy the Magnum PI mansion in Hawaii or property in Martha's Vineyard if it was going to be underwater?
Right. You would think they would know, the elites amongst us who have all the knowledge and tell us what to do because we're too stupid to figure it out on our own.
Well, look, they're kind of struggling here. I mean, they're trying to swim in Florida because it's completely underwater at this point. They're grasping at anything that they possibly can. And the global warming, climate change is not quite hitting. So the reason they have to hang it on is because you're an evil man, and women need a man like a fish needs a bicycle, which is an interesting pivot point from The Guardian. Car use and meat consumption drive emissions gender gap.
Oh my goodness, Steve.
Okay. So the patriarchy plus you eating meat because you got to eat the bugs instead is causing too much carbon, and it's your fault because you got a twig and berries dangling between your legs here. Let's dig into The Guardian. Men emit 26% more planet heating pollution. language, than women from transportation and food. Maybe because we eat more food because we're larger, but who am I? I'm not an expert. According to a preprint study of 15,000 people in France, that sounds specific, the gap shrinks to 18% when you control for socioeconomic factors such as income and education, but still the men are really uber bad for the planet. I guess we're not perpetuating the species. Previous research from Sweden found men's spending on goods causes 16% more climate heating emissions than women because we buy more meat and cars. The most powerful action a person can take, no editorializing here, right? No editorializing, just the straight dope, just the news from The Guardian. The most powerful actions a person can take to cut their carbon pollution, including getting rid of gasoline cars and eating less meat and avoiding flights, or kill yourself because then you eliminate all the carbon. But efforts to challenge car culture and promote plant-based diets have provoked furious backlashes from the pundits, those evil right-wingers who call people soy boys. This is it. In The Guardian, the term soy boy has been used by far-right figures, including J.D. Vance or Elizabeth Warren and Andrew Tate. So we've connected J.D. Vance and Andrew Tate. One of these things is not like the other. To end it, French researchers suggested that gender differences in emissions could explain why women tend to be more concerned about the climate crisis, arguing that greater personal cost of reducing their emissions could cause men to avoid grappling with the reality of the climate emergency. So we're just ignorant rubes,
Steve,
who are not embracing the true priorities, which is the carbon is ending the world.
Or maybe, Steve, just maybe, it's because there's a design to all these things and men and women were designed differently. And part of that design has been that women typically, okay, not all of you, not all women, but typically, and you, not all men. This isn't a blanket statement, but typically speaking, women are more emotional. And so you're able to play on their fears, their emotions more than you can with a man. And so maybe that's why women are more likely to be sympathetic to the climate fraud, the climate hoax. I want to take these researchers, whether they're from Sweden, which, by the way, speaking of meat, a good Swedish meatball is hard to pass up, even from the furniture store, IKEA, for some reason. But meat aside, whether it's the Swedish researchers or the French or whoever, or the author of this propaganda piece, we need to address these people like a condescending kindergartner teacher would, like the dirty kid in class. Like, hey, we got to check you for lice again because you're the dirty bird, and just berate them into non-existence. Because again, the assertion of fact here, show me your math. All of you researchers and you, the author of this ridiculous trope, because you can't prove it. You're saying it's fact. You're saying it's proof. Show me your math where you're coming up with these numbers and these ideas about carbon emissions or whatever. It's all lies. Lies.
I know you're angry, Garrett, and I got to pivot away from the climate stuff because I'll go back to it because you're about to leave, but I want to make sure that you are briefed up before you leave, being an Army veteran here in this Memorial Day weekend. And I would encourage you, as angry as you are at the experts, to not use naughty language at them. So for your purposes, I will jump ahead in my stack of stuff in this grab bag episode, because an Army unit's extreme use of profanity was so bad they made a rule about it.
Okay, I need another long form math homework. What do you mean by extreme use of profanity? Because let me tell you.
The 43rd Adjutant General Battalion, when soldiers are working in their, quote, official capacities during duty hours. The battalion is a specialized unit that processes new trainees as they arrive, still in civilian clothes. They don't want to project like that they say naughty language to the noobs in the Army.
They say the worst language to the noobs.
The Army, along with the rest of the military, has long worked to stamp out the common stereotype that abusive language is a hallmark of boot camp. Isn't it?
Yes.
The April 17th memo advises soldiers will receive spot verbal counseling. I hope they don't curse at them during their verbal counseling for their first violation, written counseling and a board file for their second offense,
No way.
quote, removal of favorable actions for a third violation, and Chapter 14-12B, separation for misconduct based on a pattern of behavior for a fourth and final violation. But you keep heart, my friend. Fear not. No soldiers have been separated or punished under this policy, which has been in effect since April.
All right. This is where we need Pete Hegseth to really step in and say, no, you're not, this isn't happening. Yes, the UCMJ, that when you would join the military, you operate under a different code. You're sworn to protect the Constitution, but it doesn't necessarily apply to you. Nonetheless, when it comes to speech and language, look, what's the job of a military? It's to close with and destroy the enemy. I know I come from an infantry background, so it's especially near and dear to my heart how that is the job. That's it. And the rest of the force are here to support that mission. And look, it's a violent undertaking, and you need gruff men to do it. And so they're going to curse a little bit. Maybe they're going to curse a lot. As Pete Hegseth, I'm sure, could attest, this is basically an in-processing battalion. It's support staff. Again, it's administrative staff. And they're concerned about the cursing there. Go to an infantry platoon. Everybody would be getting separated by the end of week 1. And I'm here, or we as a whole, the royal we, our nation, our fighting force, we have to look past something as stupid as dropping a couple F-bombs or calling people names or whatever. Whatever happened to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And it's part of the culture. It's part of the nature of war. It kind of goes with the territory. And I've come a long way in this regard. And I'm sure you can attest to it, Steve, as being a SWAT guy, being a cop, all these professions. There's people don't have the cleanest of mouths. Is it undefiling speech, or is it defiling speech, I should say? Yeah, it can be. Should we partake in it? No, we should do our best not to, especially coming from a biblical worldview. But to go around policing language because you're butthurt about some curse words, we got bigger fish to fry, especially from a military standpoint.
I can't help but notice you sound a lot like an extreme right winger like JD Vance or Andrew Tate, who probably eats too much meat and drives a diesel fueled vehicle, which is the problem with our society. All right. I know you got to jet out, my man, but I'm glad to get your reactions here and to make sure that you have a safe and blessed Memorial Day weekend. And we're just going to continue on here in the American Radicals podcast and pivot back to the climate change propaganda, the green energy propaganda, the carbon, because I'd lined all this stuff up, and there's some good lies that people should probably be aware of, so that you can not just roll your eyes at the communists when they tell you how you need to reduce your consumption of energy, which is directly correlative to your quality of life, but like other little things that you just know don't pass the smell test. It's nice always to get the facts attached to them. So I found this piece from Refine Life, and it talks about green lies debunked. And let's pull that up and get to some of the bullet points that are attached there. Green lies debunked. Don't fall for soggy straws. Remember how they said you couldn't have plastic straws in certain localities like New York and California? That's a lie. Plastic straws. The widely cited statistic that Americans use 500 million plastic straws every day, it actually originated in 2011 and was an estimate by a 9-year-old kid. He contacted 3 straw manufacturers and extrapolated data for the entire country, and we've been operating under a 4th grader's presupposition for the last decade and a half. In actuality, National Geographic reports that plastic straws make up about 0.025% of the 8 million tons of plastic entering the ocean every year, which, you don't want to put plastic in the ocean. You want to be a good steward of the environment, but plastic straws, that ain't it. That's not the cause. You should instead maybe recycle or not recycle, because Green Lies Debunked has the skinny on the truth behind recycling. Globally, 9% of plastic is recycled. So less than 1/10 of all plastic created is actually recycled. There was an initiative that was launched in the 1950s called Keep America Beautiful, and the campaign promoted recycling as a solution to littering. Again, you don't want to be a good steward. You don't want to just dump that trash to the side of the road. But the initiative was actually funded not by do-gooders, Greenpeacers, but by major beverages and packaging companies because they wanted to shift the responsibility of waste management from themselves to you who were buying their products. Who goes and buys reusable bags at the store? Those tote bags because they're good for the environment? Well, a couple of years back, there was a study by the Danish Environmental Protection Agency. It found that cotton tote bags have to be used 7,100 times in order to offset environmental impacts compared to single-use plastic bags. I don't think you're going to go shopping for yellow tag beef at Walmart 7,100 times before the shoulder strap breaks on that cotton tote. And lastly, vampire electricity, and this is just good for your own situational awareness, for your own pocketbook. I did hear this, but it's also good as a reminder here. Many devices consume electricity even when they're turned off. It's called vampire energy. Items like phone chargers, televisions, kitchen appliances, they can actually continue to suck energy out of the outlet even when they're turned off. So you should probably unplug them, and that would reduce your electrical bill. So that's a good one. And I got one more, I believe, on the climate change, global warming hoax. And it's also back to the carbon capture. You continue to see this, and you're seeing actually some state legislation through eminent domain. They are taking Americans' property. They're going to give them fair market value, of course, right? They're going to seize your property, and they're going to do carbon capture, where they essentially take the air and suck it through these filters. And they say, we're cleaning it up, and you can invest in us. But again, back to the scam. And I found a piece that comes from Iceland because this is what I do with my time as an indefinitely suspended forever FBI agent. I just read lots of nerdy things so that I can present them here to the American Radicals podcast audience. And I am not going to even try to pronounce this news provider here because it's in Icelandic. But the title is called Climeworks Capture Fails to Cover Its Own Emissions. Climeworks is the name of this carbon capture company. It's located in Iceland. It only captured 2,400 carbon units since began operations 4 years ago. It had promised 12,000, so roughly a fifth of what it promised to do, it's actually been able to do. So seemingly underproductive when it comes to capturing the carbon out of that Icelandic atmosphere. So last year, this company, Climeworks, partially commissioned this new plant because they got to get more carbon out of the atmosphere. This is definitely what their initiative is here. This mammoth capture plant is expected to capture 9 times more than what had been done in the last 4 years. So 36,000 tons of that horrible carbon, which represents 0.04% of our atmosphere. We're going to suck it out of the atmosphere, even though plant life will necessarily fall through the floor as a result of that. But it's a pretty lucrative business. So they're building these giant plants. They're endeavoring to get 36,000 tons, but unfortunately, they only got 100 tons. The capture plants will use these giant fans to suck air through filters. The CEO of the company, his name is Jan. And one of the founders said that for every ton that their plant captures, up to 5,000 to 6,000 kilowatt hours of energy are required. So they're using quite a bit of energy, which puts carbon into the atmosphere in order to capture that very same carbon back out of the atmosphere. It's very much like a self-licking ice cream cone. So if they want to actually fully offset their own the carbon footprint for the entire country of Iceland because of all the horrible pollution that's being pushed into the atmosphere. And I know I'm being a little bit too sciencey here, but let's just break it down to brass tacks. They would need to, in Iceland, use 4 times the amount of energy and electricity that Iceland uses now in order to capture all the carbon that Iceland is putting out. Climeworks calculates that its own carbon footprint due to its activities is a little over 1,000 tons of carbon. It increased by 57% last year to 1,700 tons, and they are unable to capture it all. So as a result of their existence, they're actually endeavoring to pull a bunch of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and those operations are causing more carbon dioxide to go into the atmosphere, which at the end of the day is probably good for plant life. So I guess we shouldn't complain about that, except people are investing in this company. They're putting in monthly payments saying, I'm a good steward of the environment, Climeworks. I want to give you money for your efforts so that you can capture my carbon emissions so I can be a good person. They're taking the money from people. That's a scam. It always has been. Lies and propaganda surrounding the global warming stuff. So let's pivot away from that and go to some other fun stuff here as we are on a Saturday grab bag. And in the first thread that we went through talked about some health issues. It's talked about some environmental issues. This is kind of both, and also an animal rights issue. I found this piece over at The Blaze, and it's about the cage-free myth with chickens. Who's going to the store and paying more for the chickens because they're cage-free? The cage-free myth, why everything you think you know about ethical eggs is wrong. I don't really care about having ethical eggs. I just want eggs that taste good and are good for me. Cage-free sounds like something you'd want, like something a decent, thoughtful person would support. It conjures an image of hens roaming around a sunny field, grass underfoot. But cage-free doesn't mean any of that. The hens are no longer kept in individual metal cages, but instead they're packed into a massive industrial shed. The cage-free revolution was born not out of compassion, but necessity. It began as pressure from activists and then voters and slow growing discomfort among the purchasers who started to realize that their food where it really came from. We don't want those sweatshop eggs. We want these chickens roaming free because it'll be better for them and better for us. And corporations like McDonald's and Walmart and Target, they jumped on the bandwagon right away because cage-free costs more, so they could necessarily increase the prices and pick up a little slice for themselves. Cage-free costs more because it demands more people, more labor, more infrastructure, and more chickens die. In a brilliant twist, those costs get passed on to you, the ethical consumer, because now you can say you're buying cage-free eggs. Avian flu loves cage-free barns. It's a paradise. Tens of thousands of chickens are packed together, so the avian flu rates are even higher, which means that we have to kill a bunch of chickens to prevent the spread of the disease. And then the egg prices get jacked up even higher because you think about what we did last year at the very end of 2024, where we murdered like 40, 50, 60 million chickens, and then the egg prices jacked up. Corporations benefit from the price markup. Egg producers benefit from the market differentiation. Animal rights groups benefit from the headlines and the donations to those PETAs spike. And the politicians get to pat themselves on the back and take photo ops. Now, the takeaway here from this Blaze piece is that cage-free is a lesson in semantics, like what we always talk about here on the American Radicals podcast. Language truly matters. Cage-free isn't really outside of a cage. And in fact, I was able to find a picture from NPR of what a cage-free complex looks like. For those watching, there are hundreds and thousands of chickens all just standing on top of each other. And the caption underneath the photo reads, "Cage-free chickens in Harold Cernsing's barn in Hershey, Pennsylvania get to roam and perch on steel rods, but they don't go outside." So that doesn't really seem like a very, nice conditions for the chickens. But back to the semantics. They could have called cage-free mass housed, aviary confinement, non-caged industrial lay systems, but those don't really play well in the marketing scheme. So as a result, we got cage-free. The chickens are dying of the avian flu. They probably have a lot of anxiety, and the egg production necessarily goes down. And then we all pay higher prices, but we feel really good about it. It's a myth. More lies and propaganda. Let's talk about AI. I found this piece because, as an indefinitely suspended forever, unemployed, unemployable FBI agent, formerly recovering FBI agent, I am always in search of the new job. And it's been a minute since I've had to apply for jobs. So you're using the software that all these companies put out there and you get all these tips. Make sure that you're tailoring your resume for the exact job description, put the exact language in there so it can make it through the AI. And, as a side note, it's really annoying to tailor my entire resume for a particular job, which you do, and then upload that resume. And then the software asks you to input the exact same information that is in your resume into the software. So you have to do it twice. But let's not quibble around that. Let's talk about the AI itself. Is the AI truly impartial, non-biased, going to find the most qualified, meritorious candidate for a particular position? Or does it have certain biases in favor of one class over another? So a couple of studies were recently done on this, which I think everyone should know about. Lies and propaganda. AI is hardly unbiased. This is from a Substack, Rosado's Visual Analytics. The strange behavior of LLMs in hiring decisions, systemic gender and positional biases in candidate selections. Kind of academic writing here, but let's break it through it. And what is an LLM from the title here? That stands for Large Language Models. It's artificial intelligence. So previous studies have explored gender and ethnic biases in hiring. So what these scientists or the people participating in the study will do is they'll put resumes to companies and they will put obviously ethnic names on them to see just how racist the companies are. So let's say they could put Bob on one and another one they could put Ezra Goldstein. So they know that it looks very much like it's a Jewish person. And if Bob and Ezra have exactly the same qualifications, but the company picks Bob every single time, then they can kind of extrapolate that the company might be a little bit anti-Semitic. So that's sort of the background for this. Now we're going to test the AI though, because it's not an HR person making these selections. It's the artificial intelligence that's doing the initial screening. So they built on the methodology and the analysis of the large language models, LLMs. They exhibit algorithmic gender bias. They ran this experiment. They went through 22 different LLMs, different artificial intelligence systems, and they looked at 70 different jobs. So pretty good cross-section. The total number of models that they ran was over 30,000, so a good sample size. And after running over 30,000 experiments where they effectively put in a resume that was identical for two people, but one was clearly male, one was clearly female, the artificial intelligence picked the female candidate 57% of the time. So that's 14% more often that they pick the female over the male. So that's hardly a bias-free environment here. Then they ran additional experiments. They added explicit gender fields into the resume. So they would actually say, are you male? Are you female? And then what they found was that it actually picked more often the female, 59% of the time versus 41% of the time, 18% more of the time that the artificial intelligence has a thing for the ladies. So maybe that needs to be rectified or corrected or at least put out there, because now we know the propaganda that is tied behind these things, that they're not impartial, unbiased. There clearly is an agenda that's programmed into the algorithm as we're continuing to push on for the girl power. The Liz Warrens of the world, I'm sure, are very excited about that. Now, I want to get to one more, and this is not really necessarily the lies and propaganda, but we are on a Saturday grab bag here. So let's talk about another member of the Department of Justice. We're not going to dunk on the FBI. Let's talk about the ATF, and along the lines of employment matters and fraud and lies and criminality attached to compensation for employees of the ATF. Reporting from Headline USA. Whistleblowers. ATF illegally paid its paper shufflers as much as agents. The ATF misclassified human resources and administrative positions as law enforcement roles. Now, for those who don't know, and it's not really included here in the Headline USA, if you are a federal law enforcement officer, you are entitled to what's called law enforcement availability pay. Sometimes it's called LEAP, sometimes it's called AVP, availability pay. So if you look at the government website right now, the Office of Personnel Management, the pay scale, it's open source. You can find out if somebody is a GS 13 step 1, what their salary is, depending on where they live, for the locality adjustment. But that's not all that you get if you're a law enforcement officer. Because of the LEAP, because of the AVP, you would actually have to take that base number and add 25%. So times 125%. And that is truly what you get. So for rough numbers, if you're making $100,000 according to the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, and the GS, General Services, pay scale, you're making $100,000. But if you're a law enforcement officer in the federal government, you're actually making $125,000. So by recategorizing human resources and administrative personnel within the ATF, they were then entitled to a 25% pay bump. Back to the story from Headline USA. The Human Resources Division Chief, his name is Ralph Bitalari, and the Deputy Assistant Director, Lisa Boykin, they were accused of knowingly falsifying and fraudulently certifying government records to support those misclassifications. They knowingly did it. The illegal scheme cost taxpayers approximately $20 million over 5 years. The whistleblowers allege that the actual cost is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, call it my biases. After all, I'm not artificial intelligence. I'm going to believe the whistleblowers. It's got to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Throughout the process, and this should strike no one who's an audience here of the American Radicals podcast with any surprise, the whistleblowers who exposed the misconduct, they faced retaliation. They were demoted. They had their reputations damaged, and their careers were set back. And the ATF and the Department of Justice leadership, they not only failed to correct the problem, they instead actually promoted the individuals and officials who were involved in the scheme. So Saturday Grab Bag here has been funny. It's been informative. It got a little dark there because the problems continue to exist, not just with the biases, not just with the propaganda, but with the federal government that just continues itself to be a problem. I do have a palate cleanse, and because Garrett is not here, I was trying to weigh what I should do. He told me ahead of time that he was going to get a head start on the Memorial Day weekend, and we kind of front loaded his perspectives, but I didn't know he wanted to do that. So I have a fun palate cleanse, and then I also have a Garrett palate cleanse. So I've got two here as we're going into the Memorial Day weekend. Let's start with the fun one because, guys, it's a Saturday. We got to have our dessert first. I showed this one a video of cleaning up ketchup to my wife. I was today years old when I found out that you can do this. So we're trying to inform people here. We're trying to have a little bit of fun. Couple extrapolations away from this, which I'll get to in a second. But first, let's watch how you can clean up a ketchup spill, which every young parent has to do.
All I want to do is see how you would clean up this ketchup spill, right? Off the counter. That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, so how would you clean that up normally if no one's watching?
Okay. Couple of thoughts. Number one, again, I was today years old when I found out that you can get a baking sheet on a cutting board and pick up ketchup off a countertop. We probably shouldn't be eating ketchup if it's that easy. But two, I think that woman there has not fallen into the two-income trap because she could only acquire that knowledge and that skill set if she is home taking care of her family. Now let's pivot away to the other one that I've got for the day. Biblical worldview. type of show here. Also, some positivity heading into our Memorial Day weekend. This is a story about, is there life after life inside of the womb?
So one of my favorite stories is in a mother's womb were two babies, and one turns to the other and says, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" And the other replies, "Why, of course, there has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There's no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" "I don't know," said the second, "but there'll be more light than here. Maybe we'll walk with our legs and eat with our mouths. Maybe we'll have other senses we can't understand now." First goes, "That's ridiculous. Walking is impossible, and eating with our mouths, that's absurd. The umbilical cord is what scientifically supplies nutrition and all that we need, but it's far too short. Life after delivery is to be logically excluded." And the second says, "What if it's just different than it is here? Maybe we don't need that physical cord anymore." The first goes, "Okay, if there were life after delivery, then tell me, why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere." And the second says, "But certainly we'll meet Mother, and she'll take care of us." And the first goes, "Mother? You actually believe in Mother? If Mother exists, where is she now?" And the second goes, "She's all around us. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist." And the first says, "I don't see her. It's only logical that she's not here." To which the second replied, "Sometimes, when you're in silence and you really listen, you can perceive her presence. You can hear her loving voice calling down from above." So
I cannot do any better than that, guys. So that's going to do it for us today here on the American Radicals podcast here on this Memorial Day weekend, guys. As a reminder to you, we'll be back with you on Tuesday. It'll be 10:30 Eastern time on rumble.com/amradpod. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Be blessed. Take a moment, just a moment, as you're grilling out by the pool to just think of the people who gave the last full measure of devotion to make that possible for you. And until then, guys, have a great Memorial Day weekend.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.